Today, we're going to look closer at Razor pages. We kind of introduced you to them last time, and today we're going to take a closer look. And we're going to look at, I'm going to do essentially what I did last time, and that is create a project from scratch. And then I have a project that I've already written that I'm going to open up, and we'll talk about that, and we'll examine it again a little more in detail. So to create a project with using Razor pages, open Visual Studio. Create new. File new. Once it wakes up. And select project. And you have a template. You have all these project templates that you can choose, because keep in mind, Visual Studio is used for all sorts of development, not just for ASP.NET or Razor pages. We are going to pick this one, ASP.NET Core Web Development. And it says project template for creating an ASP.NET Core application with example Razor page content. So we click next. We ask for a name and a location for it. Again, please choose something other than Web Application 1 or Web Application 2. Give it a meaningful name. And since this is just an example, I'll call it example. You can put it wherever you want. This one on the desktop, just so the files are easily accessible. Place solution and project in the same directory. I usually do that. Click next. The framework you can use. The latest one, the latest version, I believe, has .NET 7.0. And if you pick 6.0, 7.0, it should be okay. Authentication type, we're going to start out using none because that's not requiring any sort of logins or not allowing that facility. And later on, we'll switch to individual accounts. All right, so we click create. It does its thing, and it creates just as it promised. Web application with some example pages. On occasion, you might need to look at the program.cs or the app settings.json. Program CS contains stuff like this. Setting up the environment. It handles errors differently if you are in development mode as opposed to in production mode. Map Razor pages is, we'll see how that comes into play shortly. App settings JSON is a JSON file. Really not too much in our example. There'll be more stuff in here when we start getting into database connectivity. There'll be the connection string and that sort of stuff. All right, pages. I mentioned last time that a page generated by Razor pages typically has content coming from two pages, two partial pages merged together. And the first one is this underscore layout.cshtml. That is meant to be the template for all your pages on the site. So if you have any sort of common content, you would put it in that. So things like navigation, if you had a footer, if you had a header that would be used, would be put in there. Now, I encourage you to go beyond the default with this. Let's look at what we have here. We have this default. That contains a header section, all this stuff, navigation, They don't necessarily use the HTML5 structural tags. Like this should probably be in a nav tag as opposed to a div tag, but their navigation. This is place of interest because this is where the content for each specific page is inserted. That at render body is where we go and put in the page or the content for the particular page. And then we have a footer with some basic JavaScript stuff, jQuery, Bootstrap, and so on. Now, if we look at this, we go and run this, we'll see when we pull up our index page, it's a combination of what we have in the layout page along with what we have in the index page. We're not looking yet at the .cs file that belongs to them. We're not, that's a .css file. This is a .cs file. We're not looking at that because we're not really doing anything with those yet. That's later on where we'll be putting our code. So if you had to do some sort of calculation, that would be where that code would occur. If you're doing database access, that's where that code would occur. But to start out, we're looking at the CSS_HTML, which is the user interface, the presentation part of our web application. So this div gets inserted over here where it says render body. If we run this, we get a neat little sort of layout. I don't know why it asks you twice, but it does. And there's our page, and it gives you this sort of look. Now, this look is very much a Bootstrap look, all right? So these pages use Bootstrap, but there's nothing that says you have to use Bootstrap with ASP.NET. You can code it on your own, put your own custom CSS and stuff in that. In fact, I'm going to do that in this case. I'm going to move some things around and make this more of a custom page the way I would like it. So let me go back to our layout, and I'm going to get rid of some stuff. I'm going to get rid of the Bootstrap. The only reason I'm showing you this is just to show you that you're not constrained by Bootstrap, that this is the default. But you can, oh, there's the nav. You can choose to display it any way you want to. So I'm going to go copy this. Change this to a nav. All these classes are classes, built-in classes to Bootstrap, and there's like styling written. The big advantage of Bootstrap is it gives a very consistent look, and it gives a look that is really responsive. So if you wanted to display this on a mobile app or on a mobile device or something, it would look pretty good. So if you're not familiar with Bootstrap, I would suggest that you go in and spend a few minutes reviewing it. I know in CISS243, the client-server scripting class, we use Bootstrap a little bit, so you get a little bit of an intro for that. But I'm just going to go. I just want to show that you can custom do this too. So I'm going to let's change some things around here. That needs a lot, and I'll put a H1. And let's say this is for Lorain County Community College. We have our nav. Declare this as a section. And the footer, we'll leave the footer as it is. We'll leave these scripts the same, except for, we'll get rid of that. Now, if we view it, we're going to have page without the bootstrap stuff. This looks like a basic page that maybe you would have done in CISS213. Class. But now we can put our own CSS in it. So if you notice that this points to a file called CSS site. Now, here's an important thing to realize with this. Our Razor pages do not get delivered to the client as is. Our Razor pages must be processed through the server. The server has to do its thing and create an HTML page. So therefore, our Razor pages are in a separate folder. They're in a pages folder. That page is actually not part of the web server root folder. The web server root folder is over here, www root, and any non-server-side scripting file will live here. So all your images will live here. Any of your CSS files that you create, any of your JavaScript files or other stuff would be in www root. So in this case, it's looking for CSS site CSS. And so it gives you an empty one, almost empty one. And we can fill that in with stuff that we want so that we could give a background color to the body. Let's could do things for the header. Nav, footer. These are things that, this isn't a CSS class. Again, my only purpose of doing this is to show you that you don't have to accept the default of a bootstrap. You can change it if you want that. Let's see, width. We will save this and run this. We get that, right? That's styled differently because we forgot to give the style rule for section. So let's stop. Put a few more things here. And we'll have the start of page that, or a site that we want. Not a semicolon. There we go. So this is move it in the direction of kind of what I was looking to do. We could make the navigation be horizontal by just setting the LIs as being display inline or display inline black instead of display being black. This isn't a CSS class, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about this. I merely want to point out that, it's funny. On occasion I'll hear students say something like, well, that's what Visual Studio did. Well, Visual Studio is your tool and you're using it. That's what you did if you coded it a certain way. And don't be lazy and always accept the defaults. This is what I'm trying to say. Do what's right for the project that you're working on. And I would love to see, for example, in any of your assignments, or especially in the final project, you to customize your page a little bit more and not to just stick with the defaults and make it appropriate, make the design appropriate for the content that you're displaying. All right, let's say we want to make a new page. Oh, I was gonna talk about mapping. Notice what this link looks like. Localhost port 7102/privacy. Mapping of the Razor pages means that this URL gets mapped to right here, gets mapped to that Razor page. So the mapping in the, I think that was in the program.cs, accomplishes that. It maps the Razor pages to the particular Razor. It matches a URL to the particular Razor page that you're interested in. Let's say we want to make a brand new page. All right. So let's go here and right mouse and say add. Say add Razor page. And we have some choices. Let's go and add an empty page. Name, let's say, is contact us. So we'll call the name contact. All right, we got this here. Then we can go and we can finish and put whatever HTML that we want on that page. This fills in the title. So let's copy that over to our contact page. And I guess it doesn't matter what I type in here. Let's just put a paragraph. Contact information. All right. Now, if we wanted to access this, then we should add this to the menu. So the menu is common, so the menu would be part of the layout. And we would go and just copy this. /contact, that's the URL that gets mapped to our Razor page. Now we have our contact page. It's all set to go. Generally, we're just going to use one layout page for simplicity's sake. All right. I think there's anything else that I would want to show in this example. My main reasoning for showing this example, again, was to show that you have control over anything. It creates for you a nice example, and you can stick with that style, or you can go and style it the way that you want to. All right, let's look at the pre-written one that I have. And let's run this. And this has some stuff in it. One thing it has an image for a banner. There's our home directory. There's a page for CISS243. And we have a page that actually does conversion from centigrade to Fahrenheit. So if we typed in 100 degrees centigrade, that goes to 212 Fahrenheit. This one, we kept the bootstrap look, but we augmented it by changing some of the defaults. First thing I want to look at is the image that we have. The image, as I mentioned, is not a server-side scripting file. Therefore, it belongs in the www root file. And in my case, I put it right in the root directory. If I was doing this over again, I would put it in its own images directory. In fact, let me show you how it does it now, and then we'll change the directory. So if we go and look at our, since this is a common, is in the layout CSS_HTML file, and we look up here, image, source, logo, and it's in the web server root. If I was going to put it in an image folder, I would create a folder called images. And I would move the file there. Now I need to put the folder in front of it. And I'm going to do /images /LCCC logo page. And if I did everything right, it should still work. And it does. Other thing I did is I created my own style sheet called stylesheet.css just to change the background. Probably not necessary to create a new style sheet just for that. Probably would be better to oh yeah, it's there. Probably would be better to just put it in the CSS the CSS folders site. So I'm going to do that as well. Get rid of one of the style sheets that we don't really need. And it still has the yellow color. What I did, and again, for doing this, and this didn't work, we could there's ways to customize it, and typically when you customize a layout that uses Bootstrap, you use the Bootstrap class names. So if you do some Googling, Customize Bootstrap CSS. You can see information about how to customize it. Edit, and so on. I just did something simple again to show you that you don't have to always take the default. All right, the last page that we're going to look at, and we're going to spend a little bit of time on it, is a page that actually brings into play the page model. So let's close everything down and let's just focus on the convert. So the convert is actually called temperature, and there's a CSS_HTML file, and there is a page model. What do I mean by page model? I mean, it's the C# code that belongs to this web page. That is called the page model. So in this case, this is our CSS_HTML page, and it states that the model is in Razor Page example 1. That's our project. Oops. Pages, that's this folder. And it's in that folder called temperature.cshtml.css. If you generate the web pages the way I did it, it creates that and it sets up that relationship, and you don't really usually have to worry about that. However, if you ever said something like, if you ever thought to do something like this, it's like, well, let me copy this page to a new page and create a new page that way as a clone of it. You can run into trouble because you have to go and make sure that you change these references to the page, to the appropriate page model, because you probably don't want the new copied page to have the same page model as the original page that you copied. So you would need to update this as well. This is a very simple page as a form. Method is post. That means that the data is sent via the form collection and not in the URL. We have a single text box called temp_c, and its value is @model.temp_c. Okay, where you see the @ sign is server-side code. All right, and where you see @model, it means that the data that gets plugged in here comes from the variable in the model called temp_c. So temp_c is this variable here. I declare in the model, which inherits from page model. Here's all my attributes for that model. And what I'm saying is I'm going to put the value from the form. I'm going to put the value from the previously submitted form back in the box. Let me show you what happens if I don't do that, because this is an important concept. Let me cut this. I'm going to get rid of that to give it a value, to say the value comes from the model. If I run this, go to convert, put in some value, click go. It does a conversion, but it blanks out this. Why is that? Well, HTTP is what's called a stateless protocol. It means each request is a standalone request. All right. And therefore, yes, this had a value of 100 the first time when the page loaded and you type that in. When you press submit, you've made another request back to the server, and it's going to reload that page again. And it's going to initialize that back to nothing. All right, so we have to maintain, if we want to maintain state in that box, we have to do something. And what we can do is we can store and pull the value from the model. Likewise, we have at model result. That simply means take the value from the model in the variable result. So these two variables get put these positions on the page. This so that the text box remembers what its previous value was. This one to display the result after we've done a calculation. Now, we have a question mark after string here. The reason for that is that this is a optional field. All right, which means that it's possible not to have a value of result. In fact, we're not going to have a value for a result the very first time we display the page, right? Because we haven't done any calculations yet. The first time we go to that page. So there's no result to put there. Yes?
Why is it that double, for example, the data type doesn't have a question mark? That's a string. String was the only one that had one. The doubles, they had nothing.
That's a good question. They probably should have question marks. I'm amazed that it doesn't give you a problem with that. But yeah, I would put question marks for those as well. Good point. All right. Now, what happens when we hit submit? When we hit submit, we go to what the action of the form is. Well, there is no action defined for this form. If there's no action defined for a form, the page submits back to itself. That's called a post back. All right. And in which case, one of these two methods gets called, depending on the method of the form. If on post gets called when the method is post. On get is called if the method is get. So when does on get run? On get runs the very first time page loads because we're not posting back to it. On post runs every time we click the button and do a new calculation. So what are we doing here? We are grabbing from the request. Remember our example last time, server-side scripting. The client sends a request, and that is stored in a request object that we can get values from. We want from the request object the form field called temp C. That matches with what we call the form field here. And we convert it to double, because remember, literally a text box it contains a string. You know, we don't know what a text box is going to have in it. It could contain anything like that if it's just a plain text box. All right. We convert it to double and put that value in temp C. We then do our little conversion to say that temp F equals 9 times temp C divided by 5 plus 32. And then we form our result string by saying temperature in Fahrenheit plus the phrase degrees Fahrenheit. All right. Now, because of this, temp C and result, the two things that the page is really interested in. So after this on post is run, this object has these values filled, these three values. Now the page is only interested in these two. But it could access this by itself if it wanted to as well. What do we do? Again, the at directive says pull the value some server-side scripting in general terms and specific terms where we say at model.mc or at model.result, it means pull the value from the model from that named variable. So tempc or result. And that's how that's a very simplistic way that our model is tied, our page model is tied to our Razor page itself. Let's look at a slightly more involved issue. Slightly more involved example. This will be in week 3, which I don't think is published yet, but it will be published soon. High-low game. I do this example in a lot of my classes because it's a real simple game. Also shows you how unfair gambling games are. The high-low game is assume that you have 2 dice, 2 die, and you roll them. And you make a prediction of whether it's going to be high, low, or 7. So if you predict it's going to be low, that means that you're predicting it's going to be in the 2 to 6 range. You say high, that means you're predicting it's going to be in the 8 to 12 range. If you say 7, you're predicting it's 7. All right. Now, if you pick high or low, you get paid back even money. So if you bet 1, you win 1. If you pick 7, you bet 1, you win 4, because that's a less likely option. And if you do the math, the odds should be 6 to 1 if it was going to be fair, but they're only paying you back 4 to 1. And the odds for high or low are actually slightly less. They're like, let me do this in my head, kind of. They are 15 out of 36. 36 to 15, which would be divided by 3, 12 to 5, which means that it should pay you better than, I don't know, my calculations are probably off. Should probably go back and edit that out of the video, but I won't bother. So let's look at the example. So I run this. Go to the high-low game. And here's my prediction. I can pick low, high, or 7. Let's say I pick 7. I hit 7. Right. If this was me in real life, I'd quit and go home and take my $4 winnings. All right. If you notice, actually this defaulted back to low for the very reasons that I gave about the text box before. We won't address that today. Maybe we'll look at that next week. All right, and if I pick, let's say, high, I lost, and so on. All right, you play that. Real simple game, kids game, you know. All right, let's see how that's accomplished within a Razor page. I have my high-low web page and the page model. Let's start by looking at the web page itself. should have a test here to test to see if what the value that was previously submitted was and select that, but I don't. That's why it doesn't default to that. Okay. I have a hidden field to keep track of the balance. A hidden form field is like any other form field in that it gets submitted to the server and so on. But it's a quick and dirty way to remember something from runtime, from run to run to run of a page. You can stuff it in a hidden field and then it'll get passed so that the next time through, the page model will know what the original balance was and will know then what the ending balance should be. All right. Notice I'm just putting these at things anywhere. I'm pulling up the value of that hidden field from at balance. I'm displaying at balance. I'm setting the class to this section to at result class. I can make anything on the page that I want to dynamic. For example, if I was doing a weather application, maybe I want to show hotter days as a shade of red, and maybe warm days as orange, maybe cold days light blue, dark blue, something like that. If I had a color scheme that matched the temperature, I could have code in the page model that actually looked on a set of conditions and set the style class that I wanted for the displaying of the temperature or the display of anything else I wanted. The user choice here. I have the display of the images here from the model, and then I have the value of the model here. Now, if we look in our images folder, again, that's going to be a static file, right? It's an image. It's not something from server-side scripting. Therefore, it's going to be in the images folder. And there we have, follows the naming convention. The value of 1 is called d1.jpg, d2 all the way through d6. So let's look at the page model for this. I set the value of result class to first time. And I don't even have an onGet method because we're not really doing any processing for onGet. Notice what this does though. This sets the result class to first time, which means that if it's an onGet, that variable doesn't get touched. So it will have a value of first time by the time it displays this page. Well, I'm making the class the value of that variable first time. If I look at my CSS, I set first time to have a display of none. Any thoughts why I do that? Why do I go to all that trouble and make the display of none first time? Well, because first time through, I don't have any results, right? When the page initially loads, I don't have 2 dice to show the answer for, and I don't have like how much they won or lost because the page just is loading. So therefore, when we go here, click this, that page is doing an initial load. All right, that class is set to first time, and therefore that div is there in the source code. But it's not really good, right? We would show broken images other ways. Now there's a bunch of ways that we could do this, but this is a strategy I took. I simply make that invisible the very first time. Now let's see what happens when I run this once. When I run this once, on post gets called, I grab the user choice, which is in this variable here, user choice. It's part of the form collection. I grab the hidden field called balance. I create a new random object. I randomly display I randomly generate two random numbers between 1 and 7. And not particularly elegant code, but if user choice was low and the sum is less than 7, I have a winner. Otherwise, I have a loser. So I either add 1 to the balance or subtract 1. Here I either add 4 or subtract 1. If I picked 7 and it was actually 7, I get 4 in return. Otherwise, I lose 1. And with high, if it's greater than 7, I get 1. Otherwise, I lose 1. I then form the image variable by taking and concatenating hard-coded D, value of D1, which is that first dice value, value of D2, which is the second dice value, .jpeg, and I set the results class to postback. And postback is defined as display of block. So the second time through, this will get displayed because results class is postback. All right. And all these values will be filled in with their appropriate value. And the images will be pointing to the right image. I have one thing that I didn't really implement at first. I have this tag value. That's an attribute. I could actually make this tag anything I wanted to. Right now it's an H3. I could change it to H4 if I wanted to. I don't know if that's good practice, but I could. To do this. Okay, what I'm trying to demonstrate in this example is I can take and put values from the model anywhere I want to. I can put it as text on the page. I can use it as a class for an element on the page. I can use it for a value attribute or some other attribute. I can use it for a source URL for an image. I could even use it for a tag. All right. Look at that. I'm not sure that did what I expected. Should be able to do that. Very little need to do that, but yeah, I believe you can do that. All right. Anyhow, so the whole aim then is to write our page, our Razor page, with blanks that get filled in from the server. All right. Now it gets more complicated than that. Sometimes instead of a single set of blanks, you have rows in a table. So you're looping through something and outputting rows. So you have, instead of a blank that you're filling in, you have a row of things that you're filling in. A lot of the work in this class is going to be, setting up the CSS HTML involves picking out where in the model the stuff is coming from and putting the proper expressions to extract it. And a lot of the important work happens in the model because that actually fills these variables with the values that are necessary to do the calculation, play the game, whatever. All right. Any questions about this? All right, that's all I had for today. We'll either see you in lab or we will see you next week.